Hello, everyone. Welcome. It's Alisha Brashay here at Cosmic Gateway. I'm joined by Jeff Krisman, and we're bringing to you another synergistic conversation. This will be episode 4, and I just love doing these recordings with you, Jeff. I mean, so much unexpected conversation comes through the flow. And just before we hit the record button, I was joking about my sales days working in
Yeah,
jewelry and advertising, and I've had a interesting life. But we were talking about, in essence, the change from 3D sales and business to 5D consciousness and new ways of practice. But that is not where we're starting the story, is it? We might end up there, we're not sure. But Jeff, I mean, tell me about your week and what has come up for you and what has been relevant in your unfolding of this interesting time that we're in, being what I call the eclipse corridor. So we've had one eclipse, which was last week, when the last video that we did premiered, when we were talking about timeline shifts and Lemuria. And we're halfway through, and we've got another eclipse coming up next week. So it always gets a
oh
bit wild
wow.
and crazy during these astrological transits. But thank you for being here, and please share with me about your week and what has been most topical for you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alicia. It's wonderful. These conversations have been just so incredibly. It's interesting because as we have them, I feel like I'm already learning and taking away things, when we record this. And then as the week, the last week as the week progresses, I find that it's almost like there's different things that I'm discovering as a result. It's almost like it kind of unfolds even further and it gets unpacked even further as the week goes on. So I really appreciate that. Yeah, it's beautiful how it just kind of takes on a life of, as far as what
Really
I take
does,
away
doesn't
from
it?
this, how it
Yeah,
takes on a life of its own.
yeah, it
Yeah.
really does. So what has been the greatest learnings for you this week, or what's come up? What have you understood at a deeper level?
Yeah, thank you so much for asking. This week has been it's been very interesting in that I've had a few different people in my life that have uh, been struggling for one reason or another. In most cases, it is has been physical struggles here recently. And the one that I was going to focus on was where I really did sense where I really experienced a very deep shift in the way that I was, with the way I was orienting towards the struggle. And what I was going to mention is that I have a good friend who I've known for a few years, someone who is actually, interestingly enough, is who I feel like is very, very conscious, but he has been struggling with some physical issues to the point of where he's basically immobile. And we've had some conversations and speaking about it, and I feel like even though he is handling it, I have felt myself really, really struggling with trying to figure out. I want to do something for him. I want to be able to, I want to help him in some way. And so there's a lot to this in terms of his situation. And there's things that he needs to be able to be more mobile and just to do the daily things that people, that we have to do in life. And what I found is that as this has been going on for a few weeks, but it really intensified this past week. And when I spoke with him, he, sounded very different. And I know that I reacted to that. He was really starting to worry about how he was just going to get through the day and do the basic things that we do as humans. And he has some support in terms of family, but in some cases he's kind of on his own day to day. And what happened is that I found myself. It was almost like I got really wrapped up in thinking about there's got to be something I can do for him, and I kind of got to the point where I became aware of the fact that it was all happening up here. It was especially here, and I was really trying to think of various solutions, and it really was all centered around, I have to be able to do something here. There's something that I had already had this expectation of myself, but I noticed that I was trying to think my way to some sort of solution and figure out what is it that I can do for him. And it was almost as if the more I tried to think about it, the less answers there, and there really weren't any answers.
Uh-huh.
And so then I'm reacting to my own lack of any answers. And then here's the interesting thing is that he wasn't asking anything of me and
Mm-hmm.
wasn't expecting anything from me, but it was all about my own expectations for myself. And so what I was going to say is that after exhausting myself trying to think of a solution,
Well
I
done,
remember
Jim.
exactly, completely exhausted myself trying to think of something. And I can literally remember exactly where I was standing. And in fact, it was in this room, and I was actually like right over across the room here. And all of a sudden, it was as if everything completely shifted.
Mm.
And I became aware through mindfulness practice. I knew that the thoughts were not helping,
Yeah.
and the thoughts about myself and me being inadequate and not being able to do anything for him weren't serving me at all. And suddenly, I'd like to say that there was something that I did, but there really wasn't. It was almost, I think that's maybe the key. I don't know if that's part of this, is that I surrendered and basically gave up trying to do anything. And suddenly it's as if I started really connecting again with my heart. And it was almost like I could feel myself. The energy was moving from here to here. And I was going to say to
Boom.
you, I mean, my human heart was breaking.
Yeah.
But yet, what's so weird is I know I've heard people talk about what they refer to as the 0 point
Mm-hmm.
or the high heart. And I literally felt the energy moving to that place. And then what ended up happening was here's the weird part. I didn't expect any answers from this. This was just more, I mean, there was no agenda. I just knew that after wearing myself out, I suddenly felt that call or that guidance to go back inside. And
Mm.
that's the other thing I wanted to say to you too, is that I sensed when I say coming back inside, I literally felt as if all of my energy was outside of me when I was thinking and trying to think of something or a solution. It's as if I was outside, my energy was outside, and my being was outside of me, looking at me
Yeah.
and seeing the inadequacy and seeing what I wasn't able to do. And it's suddenly as if my whole orientation changed. And then suddenly it's like when I say go back inside, when I'm here, suddenly I'm here. And then I'm able to actually connect with everything out there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm no longer trying to figure it out or provide any answers. And it was just about trusting my own wisdom. And I realized I shouldn't say my own, because I know this is not really my wisdom. This is just, what I, as one being, tapped into this. But suddenly what's so weird is when I completely stopped and I felt myself, the thinking just stopped. And suddenly a solution just popped out of nowhere. And when I wasn't even trying at all. And I feel like maybe this has happened a few times in my life, but I didn't realize. I thought it was just something incredibly, and I don't want to say this isn't miraculous, but I just remember thinking, how did I come up with a solution suddenly when I wasn't trying?
Yeah.
But it felt like it came from here, and it
Yeah.
wasn't something that I thought of. And so I was just going to tell you that it really, to me, I'm wondering if this is the future with human relations.
Mm-hmm.
That I know for me, as someone who's struggled so much with, my heart feels people's suffering, as a lot of people's hearts do. And I
Yeah.
want to fix things for people, and I do care about people very much. And sometimes I think what it does is it immobilizes me from being able to really do anything, or even, I guess, even more importantly, to be in a certain way. And
Mm-hmm.
so I was just going to mention and ask you, is this the future in terms of human relations in the new earth? That we're no
100%.
longer going to try to think our way through things. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I loved what you said about moving from the head to the heart. And that's something that I teach so much, that's 101, when I connect with people, because I think, and I can relate to it too. I mean, I went through years of, you know, having huge anxiety and panic attacks and like overthinking and being overstimulated, being over cerebral, and realized that this is a great quote that just came into my mind that I remember I used to recite to myself over and over. It's like uh worrying is like a rocking chair. You go back and forth, but you don't get anywhere.
I love that. I love it.
And I think that there's so much intelligence with the heart, and there's so much solution base with the heart, and there's so much soul wisdom that comes from the heart, and the mind, the brain is quite limited in comparison. You can look at even studies done, about the energy field that comes from the brain, and then the energy field that is coming from the heart, and how vastly much more massive the energy field that comes from the heart is in comparison to the brain. And so I think there's a lot to be said there, is that we can tap into universal source consciousness, soul, so many words interchangeably. But I think that that's where I often talk about how I had to relearn how to live being soul led as opposed to human led. Human led from the ego is very much a me focus. What can I get out of this? How am I going to benefit? Which is how we're conditioned in society. When we move into being soul led, that is where we really are guided from the higher perspective of what is good for everyone involved. And I think you've hit on a couple of points there, and I do want to go through a practice. Maybe we can do that at the end. It's a
Yeah.
very simple energy tool that I use to help people move the energy in finding a answer or a solution, literally moving the energy from the head to the heart. And I use that a lot in various different circumstances. And a lot of the times it's when people are trying to find guidance, find information, trying to seek truth, trying to understand circumstances in their life. And quite often we go external, right? We go to
Yeah.
a specialist, we go to an expert, we go to a practitioner, we go to a psychic, we go to, and they're all great and they're all valid. But ultimately, moving into New Earth is about being led from your own inner truth and own inner wisdom. Doesn't mean that people can't come in and be a catalyst and support you, not at all. But it's reminding us that we do have access to at that knowledge. And I think when we move that energy from the heart space, the head back into the heart space, that's where all that comes through. And we already know the answers that we're seeking, but we don't trust it. And I think that's the biggest point, is that sometimes the messages and the information that comes from the heart level is very simplistic. It's very easy. It's almost too easy. So it's like, why would that be the answer? Because we're trying to get these very complex equations in solutions when it's not that at all. It's just simply quite a simple answer. And I think that I associate another fraction of that. I associate ascension with anxiety and overthinking and depression.
Yeah.
I think the early stages of ascension and the ones that we don't necessarily, people really focus on the big catalyst, like I had a Kundalini awakening. I was contacted by star beings. I had a near-death experience. I lost my job. I lost my home. My wife left me, and focus on those big catalyst moments, which really, from that moment, everything does change. Absolutely. But I think there's a lot more subtle things that are in the background that grew for many years until that point happens, and it's almost like the training wheels get taken off at that point. Away you go, you know. And I certainly see that anxiety is one of them. I see anxiety from a spiritual, energetic perspective, is a way that the higher self is trying to communicate through the body to show that things are misaligned and to make adjustments in our lives. It's our inner compass trying to tell us something's off, something's wrong, something's not right here. And it's like almost like an alarm bell. How you feel that anxious feeling in your stomach, and it's like it feels like your skin's crawling, and
Oh
all
yeah.
and you hot under the collar, and it really is, it's an energetical way to show you that things are out of alignment. And if we're paying attention to our body, which ties it back into what you were dealing with the people in your life that you care about who are going through a lot of physical difficulties at the moment. I always say that the body is like a barometer of the soul. Actually, there's a book written that's titled that. Very good book. You should go. Anyone's curious, go look it up.
Yeah.
And it talks about how every physical symptom is representative of trying to communicate to us something to make changes in our lives. And so when you delve deeper from the spiritual perspective, a lot of the times the physical ailments, illnesses, disease that we have is really just an opportunity for a wake-up call to change our life in some way, with the exception of pre-written learnings. So I truly believe that the body can heal itself from almost any disease, any I'm trying to think of the other words, disease, discomfort, illness, injury, fracture, tear. There's miraculous things that can be done in the quantum realm, in the quantum field, with healing modalities when you work with energy in that way. But with the exception of some people actually write into their soul agreement that to have, cancer or tumors or incurable, as a part of their soul lesson. So with that exception, I believe that anything is curable when we pay attention
Yeah.
to what our body is trying to teach us and show us, and the adjustments that we can make in our lives. So I've gone on a couple of tangents there, but
Yeah.
when it comes to people that we truly care about and we love, and of course, when you're empathic, when you're sensitive, when you truly have love and care and compassion for other people, it's horrible to see people go through suffering on any level, physically, mentally, emotionally. And as caregivers, of course, we want to jump in. We want to do something because we don't want to see people suffer. And I think that the human brain is wired to generate worry and concern, whereas, which is quite limited. But if we go into the infinite field of the heart and the energy, and we can connect in with the feelings of love and appreciation, we can connect with the energy and the vibration of wholeness and health and well-being, we can actually transmit that. It's scientifically proven that prayer and, positive thoughts and being able to project positive energy to someone's well-being actually changes them on a DNA level, on a cellular structure. There's a lot of scientific evidence that proves this. But also the same is in the reversal. So if we're wishing someone ill, if we are carrying, resentment, jealousy, hatred towards another person, and we're projecting that, that also degrades the DNA. It actually creates illness in the body by someone else's projected energy. And that's when we get into the realms where we can talk about things like psychic attack and things like that. But purely, this is backed up by science as well. So, that's in extreme circumstances in polarization. But coming back to just, the everyday loved one, family member going through something, and this can, what's quite topical at the moment, I won't say it on this video, but there's a lot of people with like lots of different opinions around the thing that people are getting put into their arm at the moment, and a lot of fear around that as well. So, whatever the circumstance might be, a lot of unnecessary worry is building up energy towards exacerbating that situation. If we can drop from our overstimulated mind of worry and concern and negative thought patterning that is creating a quantum possibility that's only going to perpetuate that, drop back into our heart space, and two things can happen in that. What you experienced in terms of a solution base that's actually going to be in service, that's going to really help, and something will drop through that's quite miraculous. Or the other thing is we can project a loving frequency that is going to help support that person to find their own miraculous solutions and
I
healing.
love that. Yeah, that's so beautiful. And I was going to tell you that what was really what surprised me afterwards was that, and exactly was that experience that you spoke of. In other words, being able to radiate that love outwardly to other people. What's so interesting is that once once I was here, and really got connected here, and the solution made itself known, so to speak. And you notice how this had nothing to do with me or my identity.
No.
And suddenly, what is so odd about this is, but it's beautiful, that I suddenly felt, it's almost as if I felt myself connected to everything around me. Suddenly,
I
I
just
was
felt it when
seeing
you said
things
that.
and feeling things that in the field, so to speak, that I really had not. And it's almost like, in a way, I really was surprised, because I was trying to figure out why suddenly am I feeling. It's almost as if I was feeling so connected to
Mm,
everything around me, and even beyond that. And it's almost like I didn't get really wrapped up in thinking about it or actively questioning it, but all of a sudden I noticed it. And then it was like, oh, okay. It's almost like the knowing came online, and I realized, oh, so that's what this feels like. And that's what's so interesting to me, is this is very new. I mean, this isn't something that I read in a book, or, heard someone talk about, that if I do this, this is what's going to. It's like it just really unfolded on its own.
mhm.
And I do want to say too, in all transparency, that the solution will not fix all of his problems. It's certainly not going to be some miraculous, thing that will change his reality
Mm.
completely. But then again, I'm beginning to realize that's if there's anything that's expecting it, it's right here. Yeah,
That can be limited too.
yeah. Oh, absolutely. And that's what I was going to say to you, is that I feel like that's what I sensed was the limits of
Yeah,
that rational thinking mind. And once I started living from here,
yeah,
then suddenly I felt more plugged in and connected to everything. I could try forever to to think my way into being connected, and would never get there. And then suddenly, through that surrender, it just happened. And there was no thought about me, trying to make that happen.
yeah.
And
And
yeah,
I
it was
think
very interesting.
another point that you brought up is that it's not to judge the mental process that we go through in order to get to that place of surrender. I think that the mental process, or the squeeze that we might go through emotional anguish, or I like to call it the pressure cooker experience, where you
Yeah.
you get in that tight squeeze, and that can be a fusion of mental and emotional and physical, to kind of
Yeah.
push you into a place of surrender. And sometimes that can happen through extreme circumstances. And I think that that is by design too, to be able to push us into that place of deepening, letting go, and surrendering, to be open to infinite possibilities, or for the divine to work through us in some way. So it's almost like we're almost squeezed out of our limitations, however they may present, to allow a
Yeah.
fresh new energy and perspective to flow into us and into the experience that we're going through. And I think that that's why so many people wake up and go through their awakening and ascension process, is always through extreme circumstances. I've not yet heard one person tell me about their wake up experience and it was all rainbows and butterflies. I mean, they're sure, sure that happens, that is part of it,
Yeah.
having, but it generally is something that hits in the heart, that cracks the heart wide open. And generally it's loss, it's pain, it's suffering, it's devastation, it's betrayal, it's all those things, so that we can release those shackles and bonds that confine us in our human limitations, to go beyond that. And I think that's, as a collective, that is where we're being pushed into, as we go further into this new paradigm of new earth living. And so I think that there is there's great purpose in that squeeze, you know. um,
Yeah. Oh
if
yeah.
if nothing else, of the contrast of the ways that we have done things in the past and how we've operated through trying to find solution through, over mental stimulation doesn't work anymore. If only we
Oh
have
yeah.
to, go through it in its extreme way to realize it doesn't really work. It's not benefiting us. And, sometimes when we overthink things and we then quite often, stress and anxiety come from overthinking, right? So we overthink things and we create scenarios in our head, which then create pressure on our nervous system. It creates the brain. Why do I want to go into brain? I'm not an expert on this, people. Please don't pull me up on this. But cortisol, the body creates cortisol, which is quite toxic in the body. And then the body starts to break down and get ill and dis-ease in the body because if we're in our fight or flight response, the brain can't determine whether we are actually in a fight or flight response physically or mentally. So if mentally we're creating scenarios in our head that are disturbing us, it's a simulation that's created in the mind. And there's probably experts that can talk about this much better than I can, but the body will still go into that response. So it produces these toxic chemicals. So when the body's constantly doing that, so when we're constantly in mental stimulation or overthinking or worrying in the mental mind, the monkey mind, the body is biologically responding to those thoughts as though we are in danger. And it's producing these chemicals so that we can flee or fight for our survival. But when that happens continually, right, body starts to break down because it's not designed to have that in prolonged periods. It's only meant to be, injection of that chemical. I think it's cortisol. I need to look that up. Anyway, to get us out of a dangerous situation. But when we're constantly putting dangerous situations in our experience through our mind day in, day out, that wears on the body physically, and that's where we get sick. That's a tangent, isn't it?
Wow. But I totally get it. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's about reprogramming ourselves to do almost in the exact opposite. And that's what really healing is about, is healthy mind, healthy emotions, not suppressing, and then, finding alignment within the physical body and spiritually too. That's why they all, nicely go hand in hand. And I think what comes to, I like to give examples of things that I've experienced in my life, because I think that through examples, people can really go, oh, that's not just a concept, it's not just a theory. And it inspires people to go and test it out in their own life. And that's what I always encourage people to do. So I will preface this that, animals and children are much more susceptible to healing energies than adults are, because we have so much more conditioning. Unfortunately, we've lived on this earth longer.
Oh yeah.
And many years back, I'm a big dog lover. People who know me that I'm a big dog lover, and I've always had huskies as pets. And, my first husky, Sasha, was she had a lump on her stomach, and I was kind of observing it. And I knew that it was probably not a nice one, but I was a bit in denial, and I thought, oh, I can feel it there. I'm just going to observe it. Anyway, of course, it was a public holiday, bank holiday. And I got home from work, and my partner, who I was living with at the time, called for me and said, quick, something's really wrong with Sasha. And she was bleeding everywhere. And I was like, oh goodness. I thought I had to rush her down to the emergency on this bank holiday, because it was the only place that was open. Cost me an absolute fortune. These things only happen on these dates. waited in the waiting room for about 4 hours till she was seen, and they saw her and they said, yes, it's a tumor, it's a cancerous tumor, it doesn't look good, they didn't give it a good prognosis, blah 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 blah. I was beside myself. She was like a child to me.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I was beside myself. I came home, and because dogs and animals, I mean everyone, but probably more susceptible, they pick up on the emotion of the adult, you know. So here I was completely beside myself, and sitting on the couch up all night with her, and I'm crying, she's crying, no one got any sleep that night, but I wore myself out. I was exhausted, um, completely in that place of almost surrender, or I would say almost surrender, but I was exhausted, and I was kind of sick of myself in that moment of sitting there crying helpless. So I pulled myself together and I said, Alisha, you know better than this. You've studied for this for so many years, and you're going to let this get the better of you? Uh-uh. And I thought, so that's when I kind of dropped from that worrying energy, and I dropped into my heart space, and I was like, what am I going to do? I know better than this. And I was like, I'm going to try and work in her body, in her energy field, and see if I can remove this tumor. I've seen it done. You know, Greg Braden has that amazing video on YouTube that you can go and watch where they dissolve a tumor within a couple of minutes at the medicineless hospitals in China. They're doing these practices all the time, but they're kept away from mainstream because we don't want the reliance on mainstream want the reliance on pharmaceuticals and the medical institution. And so when we're kept away from these ancient practices that work, and you only need to see it to conceptualize it, to understand it, to kind of tap into that. Anyone can do it and work with it. And in that moment, giving myself that pep talk of slap across the face, I sat down with Sasha and I ran my hands along her and I tuned into the tumor, and I can feel it now. I could play with it. I could kind of connect in with it, almost like communicating, like dialoguing with it. And I asked permission to remove it, and I got a yes. And there's certain protocol that you sort of go through, and I worked on releasing the energy, and I felt the energy almost like pop as it released out. And at that moment she went she took this big gasp breath and exhaled at that very moment, and I went and then she just relaxed, and I sat there and I was like, okay. And I sort of got up, and about 30 minutes later my parents came around to visit, and Dad comes over and he comes and he looks quite puzzled, and he looks at me and he goes, what, Dad? He's like, where's the lump, where's the tumor? I was like, oh, it's on her stomach. He's like, I can't find it. And
Oh, wow.
I'm like, what do you mean? And I go over and I put my hand over it, and it's completely gone. And I was like, I was in shock. I didn't believe it. So I had to take her back to the vet the next day because they were going to biopsy and start the process of whatever they could do. And here I am in the vet surgery, and they're trying to biopsy something that doesn't exist anymore. And they're saying, what happened? I was like, I don't know. I don't know. I just thought there was no point. There was no point in explaining that. Sometimes it's just better to play dumb. But that's just one example that was quite miraculous, and it was instantaneous, and it wasn't a one-off because I have done that on several occasions with other animals. And not to say that it will happen every time. I'm not delusional in the sense that I'm a miraculous healer, but I know miracles are possible. So I think that's the difference. And I do like to share that story because I think it's inspirational in what can be achieved when we put our heart and mind coherence and our energy with that power of possibility and transformation.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much. And I was going to say to you that it really this also makes me wonder, just in terms of, in terms of human relations, being, other aspects of this, in other words, I feel like so much of, interactions with other people, at least in the Western world, and I realize they're in the developing world, whatever we want to call this, is so much up here. In other words, we're thinking our way through every interaction. At least I know. I can't say that everyone's doing that, but I know I have a lot of experience in it. And somehow, I was raised like a lot of people. This is how we were acculturated to, carry around this concept of ourselves. And, every person that we meet somehow, this construct of myself is who is really interacting with other people. Mm-hmm. And now what I'm realizing is maybe this is going to be, in the new earth, is going to be so much more simple. And I don't want to get carried away with oversimplifying anything, but
I think you should.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love getting carried away. It's my forte.
Yeah.
But no, simplicity is key, and I think when we spoke on the last episode talking about Lemuria and New Earth, and I definitely think that we are paving the way in every moment to make a choice in how we react, how we respond, how we behave, and to try and do things differently, every step of the way. And I do think that we are moving into a world day by day, and some days more accelerated than others, where it is in a lot more coherence with the heart and the sacredness of the heart and the intelligence of the heart. Not to discount the mind. The mind is there and it has its functions and it has its purpose. But I think it's about being able to work with both in cohesion and not discount. I think as a society, we've all been trained and programmed to purely work more within the parameters of our mind and not listen to our heart. And now that calling is calling us stronger back to listening and paying attention to our heart and the beauty. And I think, that's all by design too. And the more we do that, the more we realize how miraculous life can be, how many blessings, how many synchronicities, how much more alignment and flow comes in when we listen to it. And let's face it, I mean, it's not something that you're going to wake up and happen overnight of boom, I can listen and pay attention and follow my heart. It takes practice. And I found that, working with the intuitive guidance, especially of what the soul and the heart, is often very abstract and very opposite to how we have functioned. So it's about breaking down those old behaviors in how we've functioned, and it takes a lot of trust and it takes a lot of courage to do things differently. But as we do that and we see how things come across, sorry, I've lost my words, but the more we follow our heart and we see how things can work with ease and grace, and we can have different outcomes. Sorry, that's what I was looking for. When we have different outcomes, that's when we learn to trust more, is through our own experience, really. We can read all the material books, we can read all the spiritual books, we can go all the workshops and events, but ultimately it comes down to living by experience. And knowledge is powerful tool as well, because sometimes we need to know things intellectually before we can put it into practice. But ultimately it's about putting it into practice.
Yeah, I love that. And I was going to say to you that that's what I'm kind of finding is the more that I've been able to do this and get out of my own way using this, being able to not take, give it the time and the energy what I was going to say to you is one thing I have noticed is what has been happening here recently is when I start, living from here, I've noticed that I have these moments where all of a sudden I get very anxious and the thoughts start. And basically it's the same question over and over again. Oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? I don't feel like I can do this. And I really wondered what was going on. And I'm wondering now if that is the brain's response to me living more here, that it still wants to be involved. And of
Yeah,
course, I'm not an expert on brain science or
me
psychology.
neither.
Yeah, but I was wondering. I mean, I've literally had that. I mean, I did that this morning. I mean, the first thing when I woke up, I thought to myself, how am I, how am I going to do everything that I need to do today?
Yeah.
And what I realized was because I was here, and it's almost like now I'm wondering if that's an indication that if that concern and that fear comes up, that is just, it's almost letting me know that I'm no longer here. I'm here, and I don't have to take it so seriously. I mean, I really worried about that for a little bit because I kept thinking, why is this question and this fear coming up more frequently about not, just feeling like, how am I ever going to do X, Y, Z, whatever it is. And now I'm wondering if this is just a matter of, this is the process of, getting used to living this way. And the brain still wants to be involved, clearly. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up because I think that, like anything, there's resistance, isn't there? Like if you think about creating a new habit, it takes 21 days to create a new habit. And, when you start off with going to the gym or changing your food or your diet, and you get to day 3 and all of a sudden your body has I don't want to do this little tantrum. Well, it's the same with everything, and I think that the more we start to engage with the heart-led life or the soul-led life, it will create a resistance kickback in, that resistance will come in and fight harder to get attention. And I think that the best way to negate your way through that is to not fight it, but observe it, and acknowledge it, just like you would with a child, or a pet that's having a tantrum and wanting attention, not ignoring it, acknowledging it, but not feeding into it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love that. In fact, and I was going to mention to you too, kind of along those lines of feeding into it or giving it more energy. I noticed that the last thing I was going to say to you about this experience is that I noticed, and it's weird how it happened after, I felt very connected and just felt very, at peace and was very open. The heart was open. And once that solution, came to me, and what I was going to say to you is that I noticed there was a complete absence. And I can honestly say this as a human being, if I've thought of a solution, then there's usually these thoughts of, wow, aren't I wonderful? Look at me. Look at, I mean, not, and I'm not saying like getting completely carried away, thinking I'm the greatest, thing in the world, or the greatest person in the world. But there's that sense of meanness of like, look what I did. Look what I came up with.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm really proud of me. What's really weird is there was none of that. And I wasn't trying not to do that. And I just realized, and I kind of almost paused for a moment and I was thinking, why am I not? I was actually more connected to everything and there was no thought whatsoever, anything and what I realized was it's because it wasn't, I don't know if this sounds strange. It was not it was not my solution. It was the solution and it didn't have anything to do with me. I didn't create it or think it or anything else. It just, there was no me attached to that. And so there was no need for me to, there's no need for me to even feel any sense of pride or anything. And I'm not saying I'm beyond doing that because I'm clearly very capable of getting wrapped up in those kinds of thoughts.
Aren't we all?
Yeah, but it's so weird. It's so weird how there was none of that.
It's a
and
different.
that was a little bit startling.
Yeah, it's different, isn't it? Because it's I guess one word that comes to mind, as you said, it's divine inspiration. And so it comes from a higher place, which in essence probably still comes from you, just a higher aspect of you, depending on how you want to look at it,
Yeah.
I have a very dear friend of mine who, you know, when I'm always grateful for his input or his inspiration or his advice or his jokes, you know, and I'll always say to him, oh my goodness, thank you so much, because that's how we're conditioned, right? To thank people.
Oh
And I
yeah.
think common courtesy, that's nice anyway, but sometimes it's just how we're sort of programmed in, you know, responding. And his response to me every time is, don't thank me, thank the one that works through me.
Love that.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah.
So I mean, we have a
Yeah.
bit of, it's just sort of an in joke and we have a giggle about it, but you know, that's kind of his response to it. It's his humble way of saying, well, you know, that was just the divine working through me in that moment. And I think sometimes we are the vessel for the divine. You know, I've often talked to you about when I do these recorded videos, it's very common for me to come off it and not remember a thing. And it's not that I'm
Wow.
channeling information. Well, I guess some people would look at it in that way, but it's like that higher aspect of me communicating through me. And sometimes my human's not really aware of it. You know, I made a joke
Yeah.
recently about when I write articles and write information, when I get these inspirational downloads to share and write about concepts and information, when I write them, there's no punctuation or grammar. It is literally the divine typing very fast through me or writing very fast through me.
Yeah. I
And,
love
you know,
that.
when I come back and I look at that, and I'm going to relate it back to what you said. When I come back and look at it, I'm in awe of it and go, oh, wow, that's really amazing. It's not my human that is functioning or operating that. It's being a vessel for that. And I imagine, I don't know, but I imagine that in that moment that you had that experience, it almost sounds like you experienced a oneness in that sort of heart cohesion where that inspiration of the divine and the solution came to you. It's something beyond the human experience.
Yes. Yes. I was going to say that and it really did. It felt very, very different from anything that I had ever experienced before. And I was going to ask you, this is all, this is almost like I was kind of, wasn't sure if I was going to hold this one back. It came to me as you were speaking and I was thinking, I'm hoping, and see there again, the brain is starting to think about, well, is this really relevant? Is this,
Ah,
but I was going to say to you that the weirdest thing came to me. I was thinking about humans, when humans put a man on the moon back, I guess was it 1969, I think late 60s. And I was thinking about, and after watching some of the movies and the stories about all the scientific calculations and all the actual human engineering work that had to be done, and all of the guesstimating, and all of the work of the brain that went into that. But I also remember all listening to all the accounts of the astronauts speaking about what it felt like to be on the moon, turning back, looking at the earth and seeing a much bigger, and a lot of them spoke about it as a very deeply spiritual experience. So now I'm wondering, the question now comes, what got us to the moon? Was it just the brain work and the human logic, or was it the heart, ultimately, that desire to be more connected with the cosmos, that got the human? And I don't know if I don't know if it's really an actual either or question, or maybe is it more rhetorical? What really got us to, what got humans to the moon? And I
mm,
wonder if sometimes that the part that the divine inspiration maybe gets overlooked in that. And
yeah,
I think that's just one example. And there again, I don't
yeah.
know if this makes any sense or not, but
Well,
yeah.
uh, let's take that out a little bit wider, because I think that the whole moon thing can be a bit controversial as to,
Right.
but
Assuming that actually happened, yes.
but I
Yes.
understand what yeah, I understand what you're
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah.
That whole spiritual experience of being out in a vast space and being able to take in the entire cosmos, or to look at the planet from a different perspective and drink it all in. And I think that is driven by the curiosity of the spirit and the soul, for sure. And I think
Yeah.
that, yeah, um you know, why do people want to become astronauts? You know, is that because they are, you know, is that because they're a starseed and they're used to being traveling out in space, and that is the way that they can do that through the human experience to recreate something that feels so natural to them? Possibly, you know, because I know that a lot of people who have that affinity with space and the stars and the moon, once again, I giggle because there's so much controversy around that. We'll take the moon out of
Sorry
the
about
equation.
that, and I forgot
No.
I'd forgotten about that one. Yeah.
No, no, I mean, so many people ask me that question about what my personal opinion is on the moon because of all the different theories out there. And my response to that is I think that everyone's right. I think it depends on the
Yeah.
different
Yes.
dimensional levels, the different timelines, the different experiences. You know, I have many guests that talk about, you know, being on the, you know, moon bases and things like that. So, and I do believe that all of those are valid and true and are real experiences that are experienced on different planes of existence. So, um, anyway, tangent, going back, I talked
Yeah.
recently in an upcoming interview, which will be broadcast on World Unity Week coming up in a few weeks. And I talked extensively about my childhood experiences of being taken out of my body as a child and floating up in space and looking back at the planet, at Earth.
Wow.
And I can still remember that feeling as a child of being taken up and just floating in space. And I think a lot of people have these experiences. And I don't think I'm answering your question. I think I'm going on a tangent. Sorry,
Oh,
Jen.
it's great. This is yeah, this is how this works. Yeah.
But I think that that would be a motivating factor for anyone who does retain those memories, who wants to recreate that and somehow, you know, through the human ways, ooh, through the human ways thus far,
Yeah.
um, those ways of being able to travel out into space have been very limited. And I think that as we move more forward into a society of interplanetary, you know, connections with our star brothers and sisters, I think that that will change and probably change quite quickly, especially with the amount of disclosure that is happening now on government levels. And you know, that actually I'm not even going to go down that because that can get quite controversial too. I have my thoughts around that, but I'll leave that for another time. But I guess what I'm getting at is up until things change on that level, to have that yearning desire to want to be out in those places, that would be a calling on a spiritual level for sure, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I
Mm.
wonder if in some ways, I mean, I guess the, having to somehow, that with that yearning leading humans to be, and I guess there again, maybe that's maybe understanding too. I'm finding that maybe there is a proper place for thinking, but
Mm.
it's just not of the supreme importance that I once thought that it was. And it's not the thinking, and the rational brain is not necessarily the answer for
Mm.
all of life's issues and all of life's
Yeah.
challenges. Maybe that's part of this too.
You know what I think it is like when you were just saying that, then I was looking at, you know, I was seeing images of like people like Einstein and Tesla who were, you know, geniuses in terms of mathematical equations and inventions. And that has to use the brain capacity and power, doesn't it? But it's not
Oh
the
yeah.
limited human brain, it's consciousness and it's divine inspiration that comes through in an analytical way to be able to create a result.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, and I really do wonder, especially with Einstein. I mean, there was I get some sense there again. I don't know. I did never know him, and really am not any am not any sort of person who thinks that I know anything about him. But I have to wonder maybe if there was some connection here. If there was some
Oh,
connection through the heart.
yeah, that would
Yeah,
have to be. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I think it to get full optimization as a human, I think you have to be working in, you know, in an open heart connection space and higher consciousness. And when you can get both of them working, I mean, it's unstoppable, really. It's
Oh
unstoppable
yeah.
to what you can perceive, what you can create, what you can experience. It's limitless.
Yeah.
Mm.
It's so beautiful. And I'm thinking even, and then what's so beautiful about that to me is that even, just in everyday human relations, how much more meaningful these interactions with people can be, and
Mm.
relationships with people that, family and friends and beyond.
Mm.
How much different this could be if more of that was coming from here, if we were living more of that through the heart
Yeah.
and not so much through the mind. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, imagine a society where you have the capacity to see the divinity in each and every person that you come into contact with, and not the broken human. You can see beyond the broken human. You can see beyond the facade, the masks, the deceptions, the insincerity, actions, and you can see that human in all their grace and beauty, in their soul essence, in their highest expression. No matter how they're presenting in that moment, you can read into that and you can honor them for that. And imagine what a society would be like if everyone had that ability.
Wow. I love that. I love that. So when I look at that, what you just shared, I feel like I just got a little bit of a glimpse. And so, and I love what you just shared, because to me, that I feel like that's really where we're headed. That's where we're going. And
Yeah.
so this was just really a glimpse, of just a small, tiny, glimpse of that. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. Well, thank you again. This has been another just amazing conversation. And thank you everyone for watching. I hope that you've gained something from this conversation. And I think the beautiful thing is, and what I love about connecting with you, is that the vastness of who knows where we're going to go in conversations and what's going to come through just by sharing and listening and hearing the experiences that you're going through, and the new things that you're mastering, the new things that you're um, experiencing through your daily life, and how that's evolving. And yeah, just want to thank you for sharing and offering that up to us. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, and I wanted to thank you for for your perspective, and for your wisdom, and being able to really connect these things to the larger picture of what's going on,
Mm.
and also through your own experience. And so this is something that's very, very healing for me, and it's also very enlightening,
Mhm.
because just to be able to actually get that bigger picture and to really be able to understand this, yeah, I'm very appreciative. Thank you.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you, Jeff. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Stay tuned for the next round. And of course, once again, if you have any suggestions, we're happy to engage in that in any way that we can. And stay centered, stay grounded, and stay open minded through this crazy time that we're living in. And just sending you beautiful love and blessings. Until next week. Bye.